I like the hat. A good addition from yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Panavision.
Very nice.
Gotta look the part, I guess. I don't know. We're all actors. I'm just pretending to be a camera assistant.
I feel that way like every day, at least once. Yeah.
Focus. What's that? So are we ready? Are we ready to razzle dazzle? I don't know.
It's like a few minutes early, but I will say we have 20 people in the waiting room already. So there's just a flood of interest. And I mean, I'm not surprised, but just because it was so last minute that we put this together, I'm stoked about it.
I was looking at it at 3:00 this morning to see how many people had signed up. And I was like, wow. So.
Yeah, me too. It's great. Like, honestly, I'm surprised that no one's, have you done this before just with ACs?
Not like this. No.
Yeah.
Just with my former students from the university, but not like this.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I'm ready for the onslaught, for the question.
I'm going to go ahead and admit all of them. And then I think it'll probably be another flood of people right around 11. But right now, 23 and like steadily counting. All right. Let's let them all in.
Okay. Holy crap.
Oh, yeah. I told you.
Hey guys,
yeah.
How is everybody today?
Let's do more officially when we officially start at 11.
So how do you want to do this, Miss Brown?
I think we should structure it casually. We should just kind of start
with a little song and dance, or
we could do a song and dance. I'm up for that. See where this goes. Yeah, but I mean, I don't have anything formal prepared or structure, but I do have a lot of questions. Yeah, there's been a lot of ACs who I know who are actually working right now, so they couldn't be here. So they ended up sending in some questions that we can kind of use to kickstart the discussion. And then I know a lot of the people that are here now also have questions. A lot of them are already book readers and fans of yours. So I don't think we'll be at a loss for conversation topics today for sure.
And a couple of them that couldn't be here today sent me a message, and I said, if today is successful, we'll do it again.
I love that.
You know, and hopefully it'll work out for those people that couldn't be here. I'm glad that they're working in the era of COVID-19. So
right. Exactly. Yeah. I was glad that all the people who are joining ended up being free, because it's pretty busy, at least in LA right now. It's super swamped.
How many people?
How many people are here? We have 36 people right now, right at 11. I mean, I'm not surprised that camera assistants are showing up early, right? Like that's just kind of the name of the game.
Oh, that's what we do.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I was on it.
We got to find the catering truck. We got to find the honey wagon. So we got to get there early.
Yeah. I want avocado in my burrito. And if you show up right on time, you're not going to get it. So.
Yeah.
Hey, Caitlin, make me a co-host and I'll help you facilitate like muting people.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I can at least make you the host.
Whatever works for you. I know how to do all this stuff
take
now.
The power.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and kick things off officially. Thank you all for being here. David Elkins, author of the Camera Assistance Manual, a book that's just packed with information on camera assisting, especially emphasis on film loading and working with film, but the more recent editions also include information on digital. So no matter what kind of sphere of the industry you find yourself working in, it's really a must-read book. There's so much information that you can learn from. So definitely recommend you picking up a copy. But today we have the real deal, David himself, who's coming to chat about his time in the film industry.
Hi, guys.
Yeah. So thank you so much, David, for joining us today. Really excited to have this conversation.
I love to do this. I love to meet new camera people and answer questions and talk about the industry. It's the best job in the world.
I think we're all in that boat. We all really love what we do, and we're really excited for this. So let me kick off with a question that came in just to kind of start out, because I think it's a good starting point. We have a lot of highly experienced camera assistants and operators names that I'm already seeing here. But not everybody has already done months on set or has joined Local 600. So Mark McField asked, for someone starting out with not too much set experience, but who's extremely eager and driven to learn and grow, where can they start when trying to find a job working on set?
There's a couple of ways to start. If he knows anybody in the film industry, that's one excellent way. Start developing your network of people in the business. If not, if he lives in an area where filmmaking is active, New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, various other cities. Try to go into the rental companies that are in those cities, introduce yourself, and try to be there when the assistants are prepping and offer to help, and just show that you're willing to work and willing to learn. There's so many different ways. I personally went to film school. So I went to Columbia College, Hollywood. And 2 months after I graduated, I was on my first feature. It was a low budget feature. 90% of the crew were my classmates, but it was a production. I was getting paid for it. And that just led to my next job, and my next job. So just work hard. I always tell people who are not in the business, or my students when I was teaching, that your hardest job is finding the next job.
I absolutely agree. So David, did you always know that you wanted to work in camera? Like when you joined film school, was that where you saw yourself?
No, before I went to film school, I sold drugs.
Really? Is that
true? That's my standard answer. I was a clerk in a retail pharmacy.
Gotcha.
That doesn't sound as exciting as I sold drugs. No. I started working in this pharmacy when I was 16, and I've got my first job in my hometown in Connecticut. Movies and film, I love to go to the movies, love to watch films, but I don't know if I was stupid or ignorant or what. I didn't realize at the time that all of those names that you see at the beginning of a movie or a TV show or at the end were people who actually worked to make the movie and got paid for it. It just never sunk in until I was much older and realized, and was reading books about, I read a lot of books about the making of. And my favorite movie of all time, and please don't laugh, everyone, is The Wizard of Oz. Because for me, I was always interested partially in special effects. And the special effects that were done in that movie that was made in 1938 were on par with some films that have been made in the last 20 years or 30 years or so. They're just amazing for the time period and what they were able to do, in my opinion. So I read about movies, played around with my dad's Super 8 movie camera, edited together our home movies. Matter of fact, my wife and I just started watching old home movies this past weekend, getting a good laugh about looking at me when I was 3 years old. But that's kind of how it started, but it never, ever occurred to me to be a career. When I graduated high school, I went to the University of Connecticut and I majored in mathematics. I was going to be a mathematics teacher in junior college. That was my original goal. Well, being the 70s and being a little bit rebellious, I didn't agree with the University of Connecticut's policy on training teachers and such. So I dropped out of their teaching program and just took a general liberal arts course and graduated with a bachelor's degree in mathematics. With the hope, right around that time, they were talking about these fancy gadgets called home computers. And I thought, well, maybe with my math degree, I'd get into computers or something. Through a variety of personal things happening in my life, I won't get into detail, but my dad and I ended up taking a vacation to Los Angeles to visit some friends of our family. My mom had passed away. And so we went to Los Angeles, and I was 19 years old. I was literally walked out of the terminal at LAX and looked around, had never been there before. And I looked at my dad and I said, I'm going to live here someday.
Wow.
And every year after that, for 6 years, I took a vacation to California and stayed with our friends and drove around Hollywood and went down the Universal Studios tour. Had to do that, as for those of you that are from LA know. And then the day came when it was time for me to move. So I packed up everything I owned and I drove cross country in 1980. And all the way up until that, from, like I said, from when I was 16 to that point, I was still working in the pharmacy, stocking shelves, being a cashier, doing everything they needed me to do. And I ended up working for a chain pharmacy out in California. Doesn't exist anymore. But it happened to be right next to the Warner Brothers Ranch in Burbank on Hollywood Way. And I drive right by Warner Brothers Studios and Universal Studios. And on weekends, I'd just take a drive around, or on the weekday, on my day off, I'd go through these neighborhoods, and all of a sudden I'd come across all of these trucks and trailers and big lights and cameras and people making something. And it's just, all of a sudden I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I found, shortly after moving to LA, I found this great little bookstore on Hollywood Boulevard. And I found this magazine called American Cinematographer that I had never heard of. And I started reading, and I got every month I got it, and read it cover to cover. And it just, retail pharmacies started to be really horrible, and dealing with, let's just say, bitchy customers. Didn't want to do that anymore. And so I started looking into film schools, and I knew I wanted to do something with camera because I always liked taking pictures. So I found this school, Columbia College, that stressed the production aspect. You got your hands on, I had my hands on a 60mm camera my very first day of school. Wow. Just to see what it, and we were shooting with it, within a couple of weeks. And so I went to film school. I graduated from there, and I never looked back. I left my retail job right after I graduated, like a week after I graduated from Columbia. And like I said, 2 months after graduation, I did that low budget film, and I was craft services on the low budget film.
Wow. So you weren't even camera department on your film?
Nope.
Film. Yeah.
Nope. That was the only job available. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Whatever. And one afternoon, the DP was talking to the assistant about doing some second unit shooting that weekend. And they needed a second AC to load because the second AC of the main production didn't want to work on the weekend. And I was standing right there. And I said, well, I did all kinds of loading and camera work and camera reports and paperwork when I was in film school. I can do it. And the DP asked me a couple of questions, and he gave me a shot. And we went out in the desert outside of LA and blew up an airplane. And I loaded like half a dozen 35mm mags that weekend. And on the next full feature that this DP did, I was hired as a second AC. And it started from there. And, I did that first full second AC job was on a film called Prison Ship, The Legend of Torah, about a woman's prison in space, in outer space. It was a classic. You might find it in the $1.99 bin at your local Walmart or something, but it was a job. It was production experience. It went on the resume. And like I said, that built my network. That started my network because I met other ACs. I met the DP, the gaffer, the other people. And I like to think of myself as a hard worker. And I proved myself. And I went from there. And that led to more jobs, better jobs, until at some point in my career, I was able to work on Emmy Award-winning television shows like The Wonder Years and Star Trek: The Next Generation. So, it just went from there.
Yeah.
It went from there. The funny thing for me, and I'll shut up now and let somebody else ask a question. But the funny thing for me is when I was in film school, my last semester, I had a professor, a cinematographer named Harry Wolf. And if you look him up sometime, he's did a lot of great stuff. But Harry Wolf had been the second AC. He was an older gentleman. He had been the second AC on Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz, my favorite film. And he had stories. He came to school one day and he goes, "That goddamn munchkins came to work drunk every day." I'm like, okay, but he all he did was tell us stories about Gone with the Wind and the Wizard of Oz. But he was an amazing cinematographer too.
Wow.
So that's kind of how I started out.
Yeah.
Went from small town boy selling pharmaceuticals to making big movies and TV shows. And
right on.
Shortly after, one more thing, three years after I graduated from Columbia, the president of the school called me up and asked me if I'd be interested in teaching a class in how to be a camera assistant, because there was no class. Most of how I learned it was on the job training. And so I started teaching the class, and that's how the book came about, as I compiled notes on what I was going to teach everybody every night. So
yeah, that's actually going to be one of my questions of how did you even have time to write this book while you're working as a professional AC? Because I know I don't have time to barely reply to emails when I'm actually working. What you're saying about your start and how you didn't even have the resources or the knowledge to know that working in film was a legitimate career. That sounds very familiar with what I hear with a lot of the people I talk to who are working now, just who kind of found their way into camera by either luck or chance, or just kind of everyone finds a different way. And if anyone else has a question, please go ahead and raise your hand, which is one of the reaction functions on this Zoom chat, or you can feel free to type them in the chat and Matthew will start kind of keeping track. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and ask another question that kind of relates as far as starting out, knowing nobody in film or in camera department, and then eventually, as you did, building to working with, camera department from The Wizard of Oz. How do you kind of keep those connections and kind of build those when you meet people? How do you stay in touch and kind of try to keep growing your network? Do you have any tips on that?
Well, one thing, we all usually, I think it still applies, we all get a crew list from shows we're working on. And if we don't, I would always go around to the people that I wanted to work with again and say, when, a couple of days before the show ended, "Hey, can I have your phone number?" And when computers started coming into being, "Can I have your email address?" And such, or "Can I have your pager number?" Back in the day when we all had pagers. Many of you are probably too young to know what that is, but I had a pager on my belt, and if that pager went off, it was like, okay, where's the nearest payphone? Because cell phones didn't exist. But I'd always ask crew members for their phone number, and I'd say, "May I call you sometime to see if you have any work?" And they'd say yes or no, and usually they said yes. And then in between jobs, I'd make calls. I'd call them and say, "Hey, you got anything coming up? I don't have anything going right now. Just got off such and such a feature, or such and such a TV show, or such and such a music video, whatever it may be. and they'd either say yes or no, call me in a couple of weeks. Quite a few times I'd call somebody and they'd say, yeah, matter of fact, I just got off the phone with somebody and we start something next week and I was going to make some calls, but you're the first one to call me. If you want the job, you got the job. So that's kind of how I did it. Like, for example, on the Wonder Years, we are on a 3-week on, 1 week off schedule. So when I knew that 1 week off was coming up, I'd call people and say, look, I've got a week off from the Wonder Years. You got any small projects, commercial, music video, pickup days, whatever. Because I love to work. People would always ask, others in the business starting out would ask me, well, what do you like? You like movies? You like television? You like commercials? You like music videos? Or they'd say, you like working with Panavision or Movie Cam or Aeroflex? And my standard answer to both of those questions is, I like to work. I didn't care what kind of camera it was. I didn't care what kind of project it was, as long as it was legal. I did not do hardcore pornography, let's say. I did work for the Playboy channel for 1.5 years, but that was, as they told me when I was hired, that was art. That wasn't, but I just like to work. And like I said earlier, I like to think I'm a hard worker and I've got a good work ethic. And it just, that's how I see things.
Yeah, absolutely. So. I think that's so true, that like people who are hard workers and who especially not only work hard to get the job, but work hard to keep the job is something I've heard, very experienced people mention. You're gonna just keep getting called back. And I've also been surprised, maybe, Instagram might be the new pager nowadays, you could say,
yeah.
But like how receptive people are to connecting with people they've just met on set. No one's going to be unfriendly right off the bat. It's usually very receptive if I'm having conversations with people even outside my own department. I was surprised how easy networking is, even though it sounds like such a onerous topic. If you're just friendly and you're already working hard with these people, you're going to kind of make natural connections. Yeah. Matthew, how are we doing? Do we have any hands up or questions?
There is one from the audience. Sarah Winters asks, can you give tips on improving your organizational skills and ability to be detail-oriented? Those skill sets don't come naturally to me.
That's a great question.
That is a great question. And if that's something, if it doesn't come naturally, you've got to work really hard at it. Because I had, students, a lot of them that weren't very well organized. And they struggled to, specific tips. Let me think. For me, it came naturally because it was, I don't want to say drilled into me, but it was just instilled in me by my dad's work ethic. And I watched him as I was growing up and what he did and how he dealt with people. Let's see. Let me come back to that. Let's come back to that, Matthew, while I think on it, okay? Keep that in the back. It is put that off to the side, but I won't forget it.
Yeah,
we'll bring it back up.
Easier to talk in specifics too, like depending what your role is in the camera department, there are different tips and kind of strategies. If I were to contribute one, I know I'm definitely more in the beginning stages of my career, but I would say communicating and delegating would be a big one. If you're not particularly good at paperwork, allowing someone else to help you, or at least communicating and being very proactive about, maybe I'm the first AC and I know that I tend to like always leave my cart really messy. I communicate with my seconds and I'm like, hey, you know what? I tend to sometimes leave my Allen keys everywhere and I don't mind at all. If you have a minute and you don't mind lining them up for me, I would like totally appreciate that. Even just that kind of communication can like, A, I don't always have to be lining up my own Allen keys, but B, it kind of allows for the collaboration to become a strength on set with the team you're working with. So that's one thing I would say.
Yeah. And another, nowadays, especially, it just came to me that there's so many apps that are available for different organizational things. Like the second AC or the loader, whatever your position, the low person in the camera department is usually the one that fills out the time cards for the entire crew, the camera crew. And there's a couple of great apps for keeping that information. So instead of trying to write it down on a piece of paper and getting real sloppy and not being able to read it, you can use these apps to keep track of that. Same thing with camera reports and inventory forms. If you have to keep an inventory, if you're doing a film job. But I feel you should always keep an inventory of all of your media that you're using, even in digital, whether it's memory cards, media cards, hard drives. Know exactly what you have and where it is. So you use the technology that we have today. That's one thing. So that's not a complete answer for that question, but it's part of it for now.
That's a great one. I see we have a couple of hands up, but there's another question that kind of ties in, so I want to sneak it in. But this one's from Kyle Summers, who's on a feature right now, so couldn't make it, but congrats on that, Kyle. Wanted to know what your views.
Oh, there's Kyle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, he may be like sneaking onto the Zoom for a bit. So that's awesome. So yeah, he wanted to know what your opinions are about ACs who, or the work ethic, which can kind of go too far, which is either like doing too much on your own or potentially like breaking your back, lifting the entire camera head and sticks at once, and what your philosophy is on that.
I was never afraid to ask another AC or a grip for help. I'd rather do that than to drop the camera. So I will always, if it's outside of my department, I would always go to the key grip and say, hey, if we're doing a big move, can one of your guys help us with the camera gear? When I worked, it was just me and a second AC. Sometimes it was just me. And I couldn't do it all. I had my carts and everything. So I'd always ask and make sure that there was somebody available. But when it came time to move the camera, I would say about 99% of the time, as the first AC, I would take the camera and either put it on the mount on the cart or carry it, and have my second carry the tripod and the head. Trying to put that whole thing on my shoulder, I just couldn't do it. So I'd rather do that. And it never took any time away from production, because they're always doing something with lighting and rehearsing, or by the time I got everything in place, they weren't even ready for it at that point. So I was ready before they were. But don't be afraid to ask for help, Kyle, anytime.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. It's very rare that like lifting, like being a hero or being a Hulk actually saves time too. Because I mean, it could easily take years off the end of your career too. Just if you're breaking your back while you're young, then you're not going to work as long. So I think that's definitely the more professional standard for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
Even though I always did that, I've had 5 back operations in the last 15 years. Mm. So
you can't.
No fun. So yeah. Go ahead, Kayla.
I see Jacob Gray has his hand up. So go ahead and ask your question, Jacob.
Hi, David.
Hey, Gray.
Firstly, thank you for your wonderful book. I picked up fifth edition of Camera Systems Manual probably 7 years ago when I was still pretty green, and I've never let it go. Take it to set with me. Thank you for that. My question is, do you have any memories of when Panavision Genesis came out, the Panavision's first digital camera, good or bad?
I vaguely remember it. I never used it. And I did get the guys at Panavision showed it to me when it first came out, but I really don't have any professional opinion of it because I never used it.
Oh, so you met Dominic Aiello?
No, another guy at Panavision, Jim Roudabush, who's a vice president of sales and marketing, is a very good friend of mine. So anytime they had any new equipment coming out, he would always show it to me.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You worked
You're welcome.
exclusively on film shows, right, David?
My experience as a first AC and an operator was 100% on film.
Wow.
So
Nice.
Speaking of film, I see my film loader's hand is up. So what you got, McKay?
Hi, Mr. Elkins.
Hey, stop right there. It's David.
Oh,
Please.
thanks, David.
All of you.
I'm doing great. I'm super excited. You're the guy who wrote the book, and yeah, I do have some film related questions. You know, like it's hard to find this stuff online. You know, I've encountered a couple of weird film experiences, and I'm like, what? I don't even you like Google something and there's nothing. It's so hard to find, but it all rests within people like you who've just worked with this stuff, and so I'm so happy to be able to talk to you. And thanks for your time. But
my pleasure.
I've got a couple, two questions. One of them is a little bit cheeky, so forgive me for that. But yeah, my first question is: have you ever flashed a mag?
A shot mag or an unexposed mag?
Oh, I'd like to hear both. I'm curious about like, or just one story if you have.
Never flashed a roll of film that had been shot.
That's a good record. Yeah.
Unexposed film twice. Yeah.
Do you have like a would you care telling the story just to kind of?
Oh, sure. I was working with a cinematographer named John Schwartzman, who's done a lot of big stuff. I started out with him when he started out, and we were doing a commercial being directed by Michael Bay. And I'm sure most of you have heard of Michael Bay. Yeah. And I was in the dark room at Claremont Camera, which doesn't exist anymore, in North Hollywood, when John knocked on the door to ask me a question. And I turned on the light and opened the door and realized that the lid was off the magazine that I had just loaded. And so it was a 16 millimeter, so it wasn't really costly. It was a 400-foot roll.
Yeah.
John looked at me and smiled and laughed and said, "Just load up another one. Don't worry about it." So
wait, so he was the one who opened the door, or you?
No, I opened the door. He knocked on the door.
Yeah.
And I could have said, "Hold on a minute," but I figured if the DP wants me, it's got to be important. And I didn't think.
An easy mistake to make. Yeah. I mean,
the other time I was doing a music video at a club on Sunset Boulevard. It was for let's see, the band was called Chucky Wise and the Goddamn Liars.
Sweet.
And we were shooting again 16 millimeter black and white. We were using an Aeroflex M camera, very old 16 millimeter camera. I loaded it up in the bag. Back then, we didn't have changing tents, so I had to use a changing bag. I loaded it up, placed the magazine on the camera, and as I was walking back to my loading area, I heard this metallic sound of something hitting the floor. And I turned around, and it was the lid of the magazine had fallen off. And there was the roll of 16 millimeter film and the DP was a buddy of mine who I had gone to film school with. And the same thing, he just looked at me and he kind of laughed. He said, "Just load up another one. It's not a big deal." But those are the only two times that I flashed a roll of film, and thankfully both of them were unexposed. So
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. It's fun to hear. I mean, it's honestly just fun to hear from the guy who wrote the book. It's like humbling, right? Like nobody's perfect, and
No,
when you make
certainly not me.
So. Well, okay. I have one more question that's a little bit more informative. I kind of, I try to listen to podcasts, and I want to absorb sort of a lot of the techniques that were developed that came from using 16 and 35 millimeter. But I think now with digital, a lot of those, I mean, things are so different. We can just monitor everything instantly. There's, you don't have to do dailies. Like so many different processes have changed. And I was kind of wondering if, what film terminology that is lost on digital productions should still be learned by a camera assistant today. If you have any specific examples or.
Well, I as I said earlier, I haven't worked on very many digital projects other than being involved in the ones that my students were shooting. And most of the terminology has carried over.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, like mag and roll number and things like that.
That's true. Yeah.
We still use f-stops and t-stops and ASA or ISO or EI values, depending on who you're talking to. The terms, I'm not aware of very many, if any, words or terms that have been lost. Off the top of my head right now, I can't think of any.
Yesterday,
I'm sure there are some, but I just can't think of them.
Yesterday, you and I were talking a little bit about how the processes of shooting have changed. I mean, you were telling me about when you were working as a focus puller and like never looked at a monitor. I mean, I feel like that could kind of somewhat relate to the transition between film and digital.
Definitely. I don't want to say never, because they always tell you never say never. Only once did I pull focus off a monitor. It's because the camera was on a crane way up in the air, and we had it connected to a monitor and a remote head. That's the only way I could see the image was through this monitor. But when I was just pulling focus on regular shots, actors acting and walking and talking and like that, I never used the monitor. I mean, when I first started out, really, video assist was so brand new, nobody wanted to use it. And then the video assist cameras that mounted to the film camera were so poor. The quality was, I mean, all they were really used for back in the early days was just to see, if the actor's in the frame. There's no way you could judge focus. No possible way. So, my focus, I always judged it by looking directly at the actor, comparing their distance from the camera and and have my AC put marks on the floor and making sure the dolly grip hits the marks. And it's all one big choreographed dance between the camera crew and the dolly and the actor. And if there's no dolly, it's just the camera and the actor. But that's one big thing that makes me crazy. And for those of you that don't know, I've taught the last 20 something years at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, School of Filmmaking. I just retired 2 years ago from there. But what made me crazy is I'd walk into the set wherever they were filming, and there's no first AC next to the camera. They're in Video Village with their own monitor and a remote control turning a knob. And I'm like, how can you do that? I mean, my personal opinion, and you don't have to agree with it, is that by the time you look at a monitor and turn that knob to get it in focus, it's already soft. You have to be next to the camera to see the little nuances in the actor's performance, in the actor's face, when they're getting up from a chair, that movement, you got to go with them. Otherwise you lose them. If you're not next to the camera, you're not doing your job right. You got to be there for the DP if he or she wants a lens change or a filter change or whatever it may be. So that's one thing, not necessarily terminology, but the procedural thing that have changed from film to digital is the first AC is never near the camera anymore. Once they set it up and put all those parts on it and the 900 miles of cables that have to be attached, then they go sit in Video Village. I just think that's wrong. So, but I'm an old-fashioned film guy. I'm an old-fashioned film guy, and I always will be. So.
No, that we definitely appreciate having that perspective. And I think a lot of us would agree, just like if you're not present and there, even if you're pulling off a monitor, if you're not present and there in some way, there's going to be things that fall through the cracks. Matthew, how are we doing for audience questions?
There's a few audience questions in the chat at this point. I'm going to start in the order I received them. And so I have one from Sarah Bowman next. What's your opinion about people who constantly leave jobs for another job? Oh, I'm on a long-term job. I leave for a short commercial in the middle of it. So I'm on a long-term job and a different one starts before this one ends. And I'm going to jump from this one to that one. Do you feel like that practice is positive, negative? What's your perspective?
I feel that's not a good thing to do because you get a reputation of being someone who's not reliable. You can't count. I can't count on me. Can't count on him. Can't count on her. Don't hire him. He'll come and he'll work for 3 days and then he'll leave if something better comes along. No. I left a job once to go to another job, and it was with the permission of the DP, but I couldn't pass it up. I was being paid $400 a week as a second AC on a very low budget feature. It was only going for like 3 weeks, and I got offered a big union feature at least I was making back then $500 a day. This was back in the 1980s. And we were going to film in Wilmington, North Carolina, and then Detroit for a total of 15 weeks. I couldn't pass it up. So I went to the DP and I said, look, you know me, I don't normally do this. Here's a good example from my career, okay? How many of you are familiar with a TV show called The Wonder Years? Yeah, okay. I did that for 2 years, pulled focus on that for 2 years. When I watched that show, the pilot, which aired in 1988, right after the Super Bowl, I was like, wow, how do I get on this show? This is like amazing. It's my life. I was a similar age in 1968 that the show took place, and the things that the main character was going through, and it was just the quality of this pilot script. And I was like, I got to get on this show. I didn't know anybody, but all of a sudden, out of the blue, as will happen in your career, is about 5 months later, I got a phone call from the second AC of the Wonder Years, asking me if I was available to fill in on one of the cameras and pull focus. And I turned him down because I was on another job, and I wouldn't leave that job because that's not my work ethic. So I said to him, I said, please, please, please call me again. I'm on another show. I would love to work with you guys. And as luck would have it, the next time they did call me, a few months later, I was available, and it just went from there. So I don't agree with leaving, but that's a personal decision, but I don't agree with it. You do it too much, you get a bad reputation.
Yeah, I know it depends. Certain cities have this really commonly. I'm seeing in the chat, like someone saying this is a huge thing in Atlanta, that people will kind of jump from job to job. So it's interesting to see how that changes and depends on the market. I think the general consensus is that if you have to leave a job, you replace yourself, and it's still not like it's definitely something you could start to get a reputation for.
Now, the only thing that's acceptable, in my opinion, is family emergencies.
Sure. Health
issues. For me, I don't care what I'm doing, my family comes first.
Yeah. Absolutely. Matthew, what else do we got?
I have a question from Ashley Valenzuela, who asks, I don't have much experience working with camera trucks yet, but what kind of advice, tips should I know when it comes to coordinating trucks with production during pre-production and on set?
Cool. What does she mean by, what do you mean, Ashley, by coordinating trucks?
So I think that she's commenting on the idea that contemporarily the second assistant or the utility commonly communicates with the transportation department about the expectations of the truck. Where's it going to be? Like in pre-production, you're making sure that there's going to be an air tank on the truck. If it's a larger truck, who's going to supply the air tank? Do we need it from expendables, or will the transport team provide it? And then on set, it's about, like, oh, we're working the location and the truck has to go away. How do we get the truck back at wrap? And it's just any counsel on
okay
yeah
well, if I know I'm going to have a camera truck, which I didn't always have, a real camera truck with I'll just call it a dark room, even if it's a digital show, you can still use the space for downloading footage and such. You're not loading and unloading film that needs to be dark. But the one thing, I would work with the production office first to find, because they're the ones, usually the production manager, the UPM or the production coordinator knows who we're getting the air tank from, who we're getting the truck from. Does it have shelving? Does it have racks for my tripods and hi-hats and low hats and other devices? Or are we going to have somebody install those is it just an empty truck? And then once it gets outfitted, the truck's loaded with the air tank, the basic stuff from the production office. If it's film, that would be the boxes of film. And then the truck, I would coordinate, well, when am I doing the prep? Do I need to call the driver and make sure that they come to the rental house to pick up the gear after I prep it? Or is the production office going to do that? And then once you're getting ready to go into production, I never had a say in where the truck parked, but they would just park it where they thought it needed to be. And usually, because they knew the equipment on it was important, they'd usually park it as close as possible to the location, unless it was visible in the shot. And then if it has to get moved, usually the second AC, the second or the loader would work out, where is it going to be moved to? How am I going to get to it? Is it within walking distance, or do you have to shuttle me in a van? One time they moved the camera truck so far away, they had to shuttle me in a van to get to it to load and unload the magazines. So once I'm in production, it's usually the second AC who coordinates all that with the driver. And but usually the transportation people know where to park the key vehicles, like the grip truck, the lighting truck, and the camera truck, are usually fairly close. So does that answer the question?
I say yes. I think that was great.
Yeah.
Very insightful.
If Ashley's still there, I can't see because I. Thank you. Oh, yes, you're welcome, Ashley.
Perfect. Caitlin, you want me to do another one, or do you have one from your own files?
Yeah, I do have another. Yeah, I have a good one actually. Nathan Gordon asks, have you ever been in danger on set, and do you think safety on set has improved or gotten worse? And any tips on navigating those situations?
I've walked away from many shots because I felt my safety was in jeopardy.
Interesting. Any stories you don't mind sharing?
Oh, I love to share stories. I don't remember the production, but there was a scene where there were 3 or 4 actors shooting submachine guns directly at the camera. And of course, it was all blanks. But if anybody's been hit by a blank, by the wadding from a blank ammunition, I'll tell you, number 1, it hurts, and number 2, it burns. I have scars on both of my arms from where I've been hit by blanks. But in this particular situation, the director wanted the actors 6 feet from the camera. We had no plexiglass to protect the camera or crew from the discharge, the wadding, the bullets, etc. So I looked at the DP and the director and I said, I'm sorry, I'm not doing the shot. And I got up off the dolly and I walked away. I said, this is too dangerous. You can get the exact same shot, almost the exact same shot, by putting them 20 feet away and putting a different lens on the camera. And after much discussion, they did it the way I suggested. But that's one example. I think in some ways, safety has gotten better because of Sarah. You know, you all know who I'm referring to, Sarah Jones. But in other ways, it hasn't, because you're always going to have idiot production people who want to get the shot no matter what, you know. And the incident on the train tracks that day really, really affected me, because I didn't know Sarah Jones, but I knew a lot of people that did know her. And some of my students at the time, they didn't understand the business or whatever yet. And they said, what, how could she be trapped on the tracks and everything? I said, I'll tell you how and how, why, and how it happened. She was trying to protect the camera. I guarantee it. She was trying to get the camera off the tracks, because that would be my first inclination, was get the camera. As a camera assistant, it's like ingrained in us, that save the camera no matter what. So in some ways, because of that, it has gotten better, but in some ways it hasn't. I still hear horror stories about long hours and, you know, trying to cut corners using inexperienced people to do a particular job instead of experienced people. Just like I said a moment ago, family comes first. Well, on set, on the day of shooting, no matter what you're doing, safety comes first.
Yeah.
If there's some way the shot can be done safer without hurting or jeopardizing anybody, then do it. I was on a low budget feature early in my career. I was pulling focus, and we were on a street corner. Camera was mounted on a high hat. It was a camera operator and me. And during rehearsal, we saw in slow motion the camera come around a corner and then veer off to its left, our camera right in front of us, and go down a side road. That's what was supposed to happen. The stunt driver lost control of the car, and it was coming directly toward us, the camera crew on the corner. Now, if you've ever been doing any kind of shot like that, the operator and the first AC are so focused, pardon the pun, on getting the shot, they don't realize that they're about to get run over. And before we shot it, we made sure, the key grip made sure that the operator and myself had a grip assigned to us. And that grip, when the director said action, that grip stuck his hand in our belt, in the back of our pants. They were standing behind us. And if anything went wrong, they were to pull. And that guy, I don't know how much he weighed, but he pulled, I flew out of there. He just pulled my ass and I just went flying. The camera fell off the head, the car just missed the camera. But, you know, the grips were there to save the camera crew, and that's their job anyway. So,
yeah.
Safety is number one on set.
100%. Sarah Winters asked a follow-up question to that about how you kind of manage those relationships on set. If you have to turn down a shot or refuse to do something, would you continue to work with that production? Are there steps that you can take to kind of navigate that in the aftermath?
If they're willing to listen, like that one production was willing to listen and change the shot, I would always give somebody a second chance, you know. But that's one of the things I kept track of in the course of my career. Is I had a little black book of names of people that I really don't want to work with them because they try to do things on the cheap, or, you know, they don't want to follow safety rules. They want to overwork their crew. I did a music video once for Cypress Hill, and boy, that was a lot of fun. And by the 8th hour on the day, we hadn't been fed yet. So I went up to the first AD and I said, "Hey, what time is lunch? You know, we're already past the 6-hour limit." "Oh, yeah, we've got some pizzas in the trailer. We're just waiting to finish these setups and then we'll eat them." I said, "Oh, okay. They're going to be cold by that time. And by the way, do you realize that you're in violation of state law by not feeding your crew?" And within 15 minutes, he called lunch. You know,
yeah.
I was never afraid to stand up for what was right, and especially if I had proof that it was right. So you may lose a job, you may not get the next job, but is it worth working with that company again? Because, you know, your life's in danger, or safety isn't followed, or they make you work long hours. I mean, I had to learn the hard way, but, you know, so it's not worth it.
It can feel in the moment like our job on set, and it's drilled into us, is to say yes and make everything happen smoothly, and, you know, to just be absolutely compliant and cooperative. But also it's important to be able to kind of pull back and say this isn't safe or this isn't right, and be able to like stand up for that. So that's an amazing point. I see Jacob Gray has his hand up again. So what's your question?
Hi, I have a question I've been wanting to ask David for a long time, because like the first time I learned about unions in the entertainment industry was in your book. And like ever since, I've been curious, what is it like to sit in or to cast a vote at a union meeting?
I'd love to make something up, but I can't. I never sat in on a union meeting that I was voting on a particular thing. I was pretty much too busy working. I mean,
David, did you ever vote on the contracts? Did you ever vote to ratify the contract?
Yeah, and that was always done by mail. You know, I always participated in that way, but I didn't have time to go to a meeting at the local office on a weekend or whenever usually they were on weekends because we all worked during the week. But a good part of the time, the weekends were the only time I had to be with my family. And going to a union meeting, you know, I'm not, I mean, I was a member of, I've been a member of Local 600 for 32 years. But I'm not one of those gung-ho union guys that has to go to every meeting and every function. And, you know, I do believe in it and I do support it. But so I've never been in that situation.
Cool. I mean, Gray, or anyone, if you're curious about union, anything relating to the union, I just want to mention Matthew Borek as an amazing resource for that, because not only does he serve as a leader within the union, but he also serves as a leader within the Young Workers Club in the union, which is kind of a way for newer or younger members to at least learn your rights and kind of learn how the union works and what it can mean to you, even if you're not about to become one of those gung-ho members, because it's different for everybody, but at least like having the information is great. So hit up Matthew for that. He can hopefully drop his info in the chat, if you know, so you can get in touch with him. I see a couple of hands up. Let's go with McKay because I saw yours first.
Hey, David. Okay, so hey. I have another film knowledge question. As a, you know, someone who's still new in the industry, I'm wondering if there are any, you know, old school resources or maybe if there were like books or other methods of trying to learn more about different film emulsions. Lately, the ones that I've worked with have kind of just been, you know, lots of 500T and some 250D. But I know that there's like a few different options, and then ultimately, you know, I find myself as the loader wanting to be able to have lots of conversations with production, or people will ask me questions about the different emulsions, and you know, my job is just loading it into the magazine, and I don't necessarily know much about the images or what it comes out to look like, because that's not, you know, my job is to just make sure it doesn't get flashed. And I'm wondering if you have any knowledge about, you know, maybe how I can learn more about that.
Well, I would rely on the Eastman Kodak website, first of all, for film. There is still a great deal of documentation and literature and materials about their different film stocks. The ASC manual is a good place too. Those are two right now that come to mind. Kodak used to have a book. Forgive me for a moment. I'm gonna turn around and look at my bookshelf because I can't remember the name of it.
Is it that small blue like plastic cover book?
No.
Because that's a good book. I don't remember what that's called.
I got too many damn film books. I can't find it. I don't want to take away too much time here.
We can always post in the event, or you know, kind of follow.
It's called Eastman Professional Motion Picture Film. Eastman Professional Motion Picture Film. I don't know if it's still available. You might be able to find it on Amazon or something, but that's another one that has had some good information. But like you, when I was a loader, first AC, I didn't know a whole heck of a lot about, you know, how the image was formed. I made sure that the mag was loaded right and it was labeled correctly and it was threaded properly, and the DP was in charge of all that other stuff. I'm not trying to pass the buck here, but it's not something that's traditionally the responsibility of the second AC loader to know all of that detail about all the different. I can't even remember the name of the device that you look at now to see the image.
Well, thank you so much
but anyway,
for
that's
those resources, and yeah, that is true ultimately, that it isn't really the loader's responsibility. So it puts a little bit of ease.
But it's always good, the more you know, the better filmmaker you're going to be.
David, what was the name of that book again?
Eastman Professional Motion Picture Film.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely make sure to send that out in case people want to try to track it down. I see a whole bunch of hands up. Let's start with Mariel.
Oh boy.
Hi.
Hi, Mariel.
So my question is more like going back to relationships. And the first question that I had was just like about what you look for in a second AC that you want to keep bringing on, and also kind of flipping that around, like how do you present yourself to DPs who you want to make those relationships with and like work with consistently after that?
Awesome question. Great question. Okay. I always tell people starting out in the business, or not necessarily starting out in business, when I get a call for a referral, somebody, my buddy Tim calls me and says, "Hey, I'm looking for a second AC. Can you recommend somebody?" And I say, "Yeah, call Marielle O'Connell. She is awesome. You're going to love working with her. Great attitude, et cetera, et cetera." The biggest thing I want to see in a fellow worker is, will I enjoy working with you for 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week? Okay. That's number one. Number two, do you know how to do the job?
Yeah.
Because if you're, excuse my language, but if you're an ass, I don't want to work with you. 1 hour, much less 14 hours. So the most important thing to me is having a good attitude, always smiling, always willing to do whatever job you are asked to do, as long as it's within your department. And always, I don't have to look, where did they go? I need something. When I need something, you are there, So that's the biggest thing, is positive attitude all the time. And I guarantee the more filmmakers you talk to, you're going to get that same answer.
Yeah, definitely. I've been referred to something where after like thanking that person, they're like, "Well, yeah, like you're just not weird." So that's
you have to be weird.
Yeah.
You have to be. We're all a little bit weird in this business.
Yeah.
In a good way. A good way. So I'm sorry. What was the second half of the question?
Well, I guess just kind of flipping that around too. Like, how do you?
How do I promote myself?
Mm-hmm.
I just try to sell. I'm selling a product, and I'm the product. Are you going to want to spend 14 hours a day with me? And I'll give them names of people to talk to. Call Tim, call this guy, call that DP, that AC, and they'll tell you how good I am to work with. I'm organized. I'm on time. I know the stuff. It's just a matter of selling yourself. Mm-hmm. You either can do it or you can't do it.
Yeah. That also kind of brings me to another question is, and it's like maybe a little bit cheekier too, but as a first AC, when you were coming up, is there, I guess two kind of questions, but is there any piece of advice that you would have given yourself, your younger self? And also, did you ever get to a point where you felt like, okay, I'm nailing this? Or is that more of like a progressive thing that you're doing all the time?
Well, piece of advice I would have given myself coming up. That's it. I've never been asked that. Piece of advice. I'm gonna have to put that one on the back burner.
Okay.
But there were times when you say nailing it, like you had a real tricky focus pull and you got it in the first take or something. Is that what you mean? Or
yeah, or like if you left a project and you were like, yeah, if you had a really good day, or if you left a project and you were just like, I did everything right. And like, how did that inform the way that you continued to work and like your personal confidence after that point?
Yeah, there were a few days like that, and I would reflect on what did I do today that made it so great, or was it just me, or was it everybody around me? So I mean, I always would always try to go to set with a positive attitude, and if there was some troubles at home, I try to leave them at home. And if let's say I knew it was somebody's birthday or something, I would make an attempt to hunt them down and wish them a happy birthday. If somebody was struggling, I try to offer some help and advice. It's as we all know, we've all been on set. Every day is different. Every day, I always like to say, every day is a new adventure. Every day I learned something new on every single set I was on, up until the day I stopped and retired. And even today, right now, talking to all of you, I've learned some new things. And that's a big thing. Don't be afraid to learn.
Yeah.
Because none of us know everything. If I knew everything, it would have been in the first edition of the book, but I had to write 7 to get it correct. Okay. And it's still not done. But anyway, I hope that helps, Mariel.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and kick it to Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, David. So, yeah, these are the ones I bought from you because I usually
I was going to say, did you get those from me?
Yeah. But I usually do 1 film job a year, and I haven't done 35 since I bought these. I've done 16. The question I have, because, these days there's not as many different film cameras being used. Basically it's the SRs. You might get a 435 or an LT or a Panavision. But I've had it a couple of times where the most recent was the hand crank 3C. And I've never loaded that before. And there wasn't going to be a prep because you don't get preps a lot of times in film cameras these days. So how do you deal with that? They ended up not shooting film, so I didn't get it. But I was like, and I'm asking around, and everybody's like, "Oh, you can do it if you know how to do this." It's like, yeah, but if I've never, you got the DP's cameras these days, and you don't know how well they've been maintained,
right?
On blind,
you just have to rely on the DP. I had more than one project where we were using the DP's camera, and it was horrible. The matte box kept falling off, no matter how tight I tightened it. I had 2 filters break in the course of an hour because of this. But not getting a prep. The 3C, you're talking about the Airy 3s,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
that's actually pretty easy to load, both the magazine and the threading the camera.
Well, it's more or less because it's not the first. Like I did a gig in October where it was an Aton XTR, which I've loaded, and then they called me back to do a pickup, but I was actually firsting, and I'd never built the camera before, and I didn't get a prep, and it wasn't the same package that we shot with a couple weeks before, and they just showed up and said, "Here, build it."
Well, that's where I always recommend that filmmakers, and I'm including the word digital in there, but you should always, everyone should have, especially camera people, should have reference books for as many cameras as possible. And I'm not blaming you if you know, for not having a reference book for an Arri 3, but you can't be blamed. You know, if you got there and you didn't know how to put it together because you've never used it, you can't be blamed because they don't give you a prep day. You know, again, it goes back to, does everybody know everything about every piece of equipment in this business? No. There are cameras I still don't know about, film cameras that I've never seen.
My question is more about how to tactfully deal with that. Because I mean, we got through it. I mean, luckily the loader second that I had on that, because me and him are like two of the ones that we swapped film jobs back, and we were able to get it. But I watched on the original one, but we didn't have the same package.
Yeah.
I don't know what your opinion on this would be, David, but to me, some of that has to happen in pre-pro, like just the conversation with production, explaining why a prep is so important. Because like, I almost feel like I wouldn't want to accept a job where I feel like I'm going to fail. And if I've never worked with the camera before and it's an owner-op package where there could be things wrong with it, you know, I don't know. It just sounds like maybe a conversation where you almost want to scare the producer enough at the prospect of not having a prep that they end up giving you one.
But if they don't, yeah. I would just do the very best I can to try to first explain to them that this is a different camera. I will do my best, but I'm sorry, but I cannot guarantee that it's going to be correct because I've never used it before. I mean, just try to be as respectful and tactful as you can be in the given situation. It's hard without actually being in a situation. It is going to be hard because, again, a lot of these production companies like to cut corners, and they don't think a prep is necessary for anything, much less film or digital. I've heard horror stories about assistants arriving on set and it's a digital package and there was no prep. That's why in my book and on the website, for those of you that aren't familiar with the camera assistant manual, camera assistant manual, all one word, .com is the companion website for the book. And it has documents, and I have a document on there called the non-prep disclaimer that basically I asked the production to sign. If I don't get the opportunity to prep the camera, then I cannot be held responsible for anything that goes wrong with the camera because I don't know how to use it.
Right.
So
yeah, it's all just that's a great, I don't know that I've ever sent the non-prep disclaimer to a producer, but I've sent a text that's pretty much the gist of it. And it can it's great. It either convinces them to give you a prep ideally, or at least like sets the expectations. So if
I've used it.
You haven't seen it, yeah. Have you used it?
I've used it.
Did they sign it and send it back to you? Like, how does that work?
They gave me a prep.
Yeah, okay. That's what I've always had happen. But I mean,
but yeah, I still used it.
I'm so glad to hear that.
That's good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Stefan, what's your question?
Hi, David.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So every now and then we might encounter on set someone who's above us, like first AC or DP, that is either maybe not like is a big word, but like maybe have a bad day or snap at us or something like that, and that causes stress, obviously. And maybe like your tip, how do you deal with stress that is caused by someone else or some production problems, scheduling, whatever it may be?
Well, if they snap at me, I probably did something wrong. But if I didn't, I would find an opportunity to say, hey, Stefan, can we talk for a minute, and go off set and say, hey, did I do something to make you angry? How can I fix it? You kind of got a little upset with me. We have to work together. I'd really like to make this relationship work. Try to talk to them in private, away from the rest of the crew, and try to work it out. That's usually the best way. If you snap at them when they snap at you, it just escalates the problem and it makes it worse. So just try to calmly take them aside, talk to them, not immediately when it happens, unless that's a good time, but when you have time and it's still fresh in your mind, always the same day, even if it's, at lunchtime or wrap time. We all know how hard it is to get off set just to go to the bathroom, so go get off set to talk to somebody is hard too, but try to work it out amongst yourselves. And, is there anything I can help you with? Is there a problem you're having that I can help with? Or, try to talk it out and see what you can do. Sometimes you're going to come to a resolution and sometimes you're not. Most of the time, I think if you're calm and you talk to them about it the right way, you'll work it out. Maybe somebody cut them off in traffic on the way to work, or who knows what. But maybe it was another crew person who screwed up, and you just happened to be there at the wrong time, so they yelled at you. So that's the best I can offer.
So following that, maybe on a lighter note, do you have maybe a story that back in the day was a horror story for you, but now you think about it as it's just a cool story, like DP from hell or first AC from hell that just made your life miserable?
How about director from hell?
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
I was doing a music video for a band called Beggars and Thieves. And the concept of the video was that they had moved from New York to Los Angeles to make it in the business, but they weren't happy. So they were going to drive back to New York from LA. And we were going to follow them. And so that's what we did. We followed them in a motorhome, driving cross country from Los Angeles to New York. There was a set schedule, but the director was the type, if we were driving down the freeway and somewhere outside of Las Vegas, heading east, and there was a farm off the freeway. The farmer had this big bonfire. I don't even know if it was building materials or hay or whatever, but it was huge. I mean, the fire was like 2 stories high. So the director screamed over his walkie-talkie, "Stop!" And we had to stop and get out and film it, even though it wasn't on the original schedule. And anyway, by the time we got to New York, we knew we were going to film in this nightclub. We were going to have 2 cameras, 2 16 SR cameras. And we had been filming all day as we were driving. And we got to the club. I loaded up the mags. I was the only assistant. We shot a rehearsal with the band, and then everybody broke for dinner and went to dinner. And we were going to come back and the live performance with an audience. Well, when everybody broke for dinner, I had 8 magazines to reload. So I didn't get the break for dinner. I had to stay in the club and reload the magazines. And by the time I finished the last magazine, everybody was coming back, and they dropped a container of cold Chinese food in front of me and said, "Here's your dinner. We're going to roll camera in 5 minutes." And I looked at the director and I said, "No." I just looked at him, and it's one word, "No." And he was a screamer. And he started screaming at me and yelling at me. And the producer came over and the DP came over. And I said, look, you all broke for dinner. I had 8 magazines to load. I finished loading the last mag when you dropped a cold plate of Chinese food in front of me and tell me you're going to roll the camera in 5 minutes. I don't know where the band is standing on stage. I don't know where my focus marks are. I said, look, and I looked right at the producer. I said, you hired me to do a job. Let me do the job. And he said, how long will it take you to get to focus marks? I said, once I know where the band is, less than 5 minutes. And they put them up where the director wanted them. And 5 minutes later, we were rolling cameras. But, you know, this guy was just, and I don't remember his name, so don't ask, because, but he was just a thorn in my side the whole time. Nothing was good enough or fast enough for him. So.
I've got an audience question that ties into this. Can I give you an audience question that ties into this? So Robert Snyder said, as a first AC, how do you typically handle a situation where the assistant director is pushing the pace of shooting and you don't have what you need, marks, camera rehearsals, to execute a focus pull? Do you typically ask for the time, even though every other department is ready to go, or you just work through it on the first take? You kind of answered this, but how do you ask this?
Well, first of all, I go to my immediate supervisor, the DP. And if I've done my job correctly, and I'm not saying if he was in a situation like this that he didn't do his job correctly, but if I had done my job correctly, I'd have all my focus marks and everything I needed before everybody else. But if I didn't, for one reason or another, the camera had to be moved 65 times and they kept changing lenses and whatever, I just say to the DP, I need X number of minutes, you know, and do it as quickly as I can. Or if I felt confident, which I've been in many situations where the DP would look at me and say, can you do this without marks? And I go, yep, roll camera. And I wouldn't pull a tape measure at all. And just pray to the God of focus. You know, but I would always start with the DP, because he or she is my boss, and say, okay, you know, and then the DP can say, we just need 3 minutes. We'll be ready to go. You know, most of the time they're not going to argue with the DP. So.
Yeah. This is a great question. I want to turn it to Quinn Feldman. He's one of the DPs that I work with, and I know he does a lot of 16 and 35. So what's your question, Quinn?
Hey, dude.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thanks. I was just curious. Is there one thing that you wish DPs that you've worked for would keep in mind to either make your job easier or make the camera department run smoother, or something that you wish your DPs would like always fight for in pre-pro to, you know, make life better for him or her through the camera department?
Oh, I think the biggest thing, because the DP is so busy with the director, you know, and the gaffer and the operator working on lining up the shot and determining what lens and the lighting and everything else, to realize that some of the other things that he needs, that they need the assistant to do, takes a little bit of time. It doesn't happen instantaneously. Like, especially in film, when we rolled out a mag and we're in the middle of a scene, so we got to quickly put another mag on. You know, you know, if you're a good AC, and I like to think I was, I would get that mag on there as quickly as possible. And, you know, changing lenses, changing filters, moving the camera, everything takes time. I mean, Do you want it right? Or do you want it fast?
Yeah.
You know?
So
that's
more time and all the chaos.
Most of the DPs I work with, see, a lot of DPs I work with did not come up through the ranks, and even camera operators. And I find that to be difficult because they don't really fully understand the job of an assistant. And now even with digital, it's even more complex because of all of the crap you have to put on the camera, all the cables you have to connect, everything else. And you don't have just one video village, you have 3 video villages, and you got to run all, and it takes time. So that's the biggest thing, is I will go as fast as I can, but I won't go so fast as to make mistakes or hurt myself or the equipment. So that's the big thing, is understanding that this stuff takes time.
All right, awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the answer.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Matthew, how are we doing on other audience questions? Are we winding down at all?
No.
Really?
Yeah, there's a few left.
We got a little more time. As long
okay,
as David,
great.
You good to answer a couple more?
I got as long as you want me.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, let's do it, Matthew.
Thank you, David. This one's from Ida, who asks about the origin of the tail slate. Ida has asked several colleagues, and no one can tell them why it's common practice to tail slate upside down, even in the digital era. Is it just tradition? Do you have stories around the origin of the tail slate?
I don't know the origin. I can only surmise, because a lot of times when we tail slate, we usually tail slate if it's an emotional scene for the actor or actress, and we don't want to disrupt their concentration at the beginning. If we're dealing with children or animals, those are the 3 biggest ones where we purposely do a tail slate. So, but when and how it came about, I don't know. So
at some point, go ahead, David.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I had been told by someone that the upside down portion of it was to help editors understand that slate was for the prior take.
Right. The upside down portion, that's exactly the same thing I always was told. It's to indicate that it's for the previous shot and not the one coming up, so the editors would not get confused.
Because in the film days, it's all run together, right? Like we think so much in the digital era of clips. Right now, it's this clip, that clip. They're separated by media storage, but in film, it was all one string.
Yeah, but when you say all one string, what do you mean?
The film all runs in a single roll. The film runs together, right? You're watching dailies. It's one string of takes, right?
And that's the reason why it's important to slate every shot, so we know which is a new shot, which is a new take. And like you said, the tail slate was definitely to indicate the previous shot, But as far as why it came about, I don't know.
Yeah, I think people get really heated about this. Like, I know this question was posted recently on some of the Facebook forums of like, why do we still stick the slate upside down for digital? And I think some of it is just tradition, but a lot of times there's just the right way it's done or the way it's always been done. And I think there's kind of like a lot of things in film. There's some gray area. It's kind of what your first prefers, what your post house prefers. And if you don't decide to stick it in upside down for a tail slate on digital, not the end of the world. But yeah, there's just kind of understanding the history of like why it originated that way.
I mean, it just makes sense to me. We stick with all the other film terminology and practices. I mean, this little tiny plastic card that goes on the slot in the side of a camera, we still call it a mag.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the footage that goes on that mag is You know, that's roll number 1, roll number 15, so let's just
there's no real
flip
reason
the slate over so it'll help the director and the editor when they're in post, whoever, know what was the previous shot, so.
Yeah, that's a good call. Matthew, what other questions do we have?
Hold on. Can you hold on one second? Actually, I'm in a meeting. I'm really sorry. So I've got a good one that is, where'd it go? I'm sorry, everybody. I'm on the phone with production.
I can grab one for the next one, Matthew.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's see what I have. This is a good one from Danny Fox. So he's asking for tips for negotiating with producers, making sure you don't get taken advantage of in areas like your rates, your kit fees, how many people are on your staff, and making sure you have enough time for prep.
Wow. Well, go into the negotiation or the meeting or whatever with your set rate. And, I can't tell anybody what rate to work for. You only know what rate. This is my rate, but I always had my low range. I would go as low as such and such, but I would never phrase it that way. I always start out with like, what's in your budget? If I say my rate is, $750 for 10 hours, and they go, I can't do that. Well, then what can you do? And negotiate. And if it doesn't work for you, then thank you very much. Goodbye. Nobody's going to force you to work for a wage if you won't accept it. So that, you have that power. And if they can't pay it and they won't pay it, then don't take the job. If you take the job, don't complain about the low rate. You had an option.
Yeah, it's something that's so important to figure out in pre and all the different questions. I know one thing that's helped me is having a list that I keep on my phone or my laptop, that when I get a call for a job, I just pull up the list and make sure I'm kind of running through all the questions, especially now with COVID being a thing, making sure that all those safety steps are in place. There's like 10 questions I have to ask before I even admit that I'm available. So it kind of helps to have something to refer to, I've found.
And depending on the type of production, if it's a simple commercial, and I say simple, or simple music video, something like that I know is only going to take 1 or 2 days, and they can't hire a second AC, well, that's probably okay. I can deal with it. If it's a complex commercial music video, if it's a feature of television, I need to have a second AC. I can't handle all that setup of equipment and the loading and unloading of the film magazines, or the loading and unloading and transferring of the digital footage to the computer, and then setting up Video Village and moving Video Village and moving the camera. It's going to take twice as long to do anything between setups if we don't have that extra person or those extra people.
Yeah. And that's language that as a producer, they should be able to understand. It's going to take longer. It's going to be more expensive. Like, those are terms they understand. And it's not just like,
and get the DP involved too. They understand that process. Hopefully, that the key one, it's going to be more expensive. Right. Producers hate to hear that. Absolutely. as we know.
Oh yeah, totally. And what you're saying about kind of adjusting your expectations according to what job it is too. I found that as helpful negotiating, almost a bargaining chip with producers, like just making sure they understand that, look, I'm not trying to have 10 people on my camera team. I'm not trying to have, crazy rates that are unreasonable. I can flex as long as I understand what job you're working on and understand kind of what your resources are. I can work with that. So like kind of opening that communication has really been helpful.
And for me, when I was working and negotiating, depending on the people that I'd be working with, especially the DP, who I'd be working side by side, if it was somebody I really liked working with, I would go down to my lowest rate just because I liked working with this person.
Yeah, that's the problem with working with DPs you like. You're ride or die. So you'll definitely take more.
Because I knew at some point in time, they would bring me on a job that would pay my full rate.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And you know that they'll take care of you in certain areas on set that you don't have to wonder about with a new DP, that they'll, you know, kind of have your back. And so that's a really good spot to be in for sure. One more question that kind of related to that. Yeah, actually, as far as like pre-pro questions to producers, Elizabeth McKee wanted to know about travel jobs and extra steps that you found useful to take, like in pre-production or even on site, to help you work more professionally.
All of my jobs were within the United States, so I never traveled outside of the country, but still travel was involved. Just to make sure, triple check that I have enough batteries, power cables, video cables, connectors, it's the little things that you're out on location in the middle of Butte, Montana for a McDonald's commercial, which I did once. And I always say, well, we have McDonald's in LA. Why don't you want to film at the McDonald's in LA?
Yep.
But I didn't care. Just make sure you have all of the extra stuff, because you're out in the middle of nowhere. You're not going to be able to find, you know, a 25-foot BNC cable or a right angle BNC to RCA connector or whatever it may be. Yeah, just make sure you have all that extra little things.
Yeah, just
like
traveling.
And, you know, one of the things when I did this McDonald's commercial in Butte, Montana, I investigated, well, what's the weather like? I've never been to Butte, Montana. And it was in, I can't remember the time of year, but it was going to be cold. And living in Los Angeles, I didn't have a winter coat. So I had to get myself a winter coat for this 4-day commercial in Butte, Montana, because I didn't want to freeze my ass off. So, you know, check that, make sure you take appropriate clothing if you're traveling. If it's well, it doesn't matter if it's a foreign country or another state, make sure you have appropriate, all your, you know, if you have medication you have to take on a daily basis, or you're going to be in a tropical climate, make sure you have sunscreen and insect repellent and whatever. So there's a lot involved. It depends on the location, how long you're going to be there, a lot of variables.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's all great advice. Matthew, do we have any other questions? That was my list of questions that I got ahead of time. What else do we got from your end?
Kyle Summers had another one. He's left, but I think it's still very relevant. David, did you ever own gear, sticks, tripods, anything at all? A lot of assistants nowadays own a fair amount of gear, but it's tough with the rental houses because you have to match their discount. And so, you know, what's your thought on assistants owning gear?
It depends on the gear. It depends on what the gear is, because who deals mostly with the rental house in the course of a production? The assistant. So you don't want to have a negative relationship because you're undercutting them or you're taking business away from them. So you've got to be real careful with what you're doing. I mean, I owned filters. I had a complete filter pack all the diffusion and the standard set of 85s and neutral densities and a lot of filters. And a couple of DPs I worked with always told the production company that we were working for, if you hire me and you hire David, you have to rent his filters. And some of the rental companies knew that I had my own filters and they were okay with it. But you just have to be careful because of you're the one dealing with the rental house and you're the one that has the relationship. And, you know, if you make them angry or upset them by undercutting, they're not going to want to help you. You get on a show and you need some accessories that the production company can't pay for. If you've got a good relationship with the rental house, they'll throw that stuff in. But if you don't, too bad, sorry. So it's a tough situation. It depends. So.
Yeah, that's a great
perspective.
Take. Totally. Yeah. I just saw one question got posted that I just have to ask because it's such a good one. And it's from Stefan. Welch's Fruit Snacks, LaCroix. What was the go-to set snack and drink when you were starting your career?
For me personally?
Yeah. Or what
Oreo cookies. Oreo cookies and Evian water.
There we go. Awesome. Will we see that in edition 8 of the camera system?
I don't know.
No, that's really important. That's really good to know. McKay, you got a question?
Hey, yeah. So I kind of wanted to expand on the topic of rental houses and ask you, David, if you had a favorite rental house, and along with that, kind of the main steps that you can take to build up a good relationship with the rental house so that you can get to the point where they're willing to throw in the extra stuff or to, you know, work hard to find stuff for you. Yeah, makes sense.
Panavision, and they don't pay me to say that. Because they seem to be always willing to help out any filmmakers, whether it's a beginner or someone who's established. They'll go the extra mile. At least every time I dealt with them, whether it was Hollywood or Woodland Hills or Panavision Florida or Panavision Atlanta or Panavision New York, I've dealt with all of them and never, ever had a problem. I was just telling Caitlin last night, up until this past October, if you over my right shoulder, there used to be a Panavision 16 millimeter camera sitting there, fully functioning 16 millimeter Panavision on a Panahead, sitting on a hi-hat that Panavision gave me. I've since sent it back to them. Yeah, it was for educational purposes, but I used it at the school where I taught. And then when I retired, I brought it to where I retired to because it was given to me. And it was the 16 millimeter. Many of you, some of you may know of the 16. It used to be called the Elaine. It was named after Elaine Barber, who actually still works at Panavision in Woodland Hills. But my buddy that I mentioned earlier, Jim Raudebush, called me up one day back in 2012, and he said, you know, we're not renting the 16 cameras anymore. We're going to phase them out of the catalog. And I know you've used it on a number of shows in your career. We're going to put a lot of them in our rental houses as a museum piece. And we're just wondering, would you like one? Now, how many people get a phone call asking if, you know, you want to be given a Panavision camera? it didn't take me very
That's
long
very
to answer
cool.
that question. So, but as I said, I just sent it back because as I mentioned earlier, I've had a number of back operations. It was just too much for me to deal with all the cases and all the equipment, and I wasn't teaching anymore. So I figured let it go back to them and they can put it to good use somewhere. But they've always treated me properly. And so I, but I can't pick a rental house that I didn't like working out of. They were all amazing. How many of you are familiar with Keslow down in Culver City?
Yeah. I've read there a couple times.
Robert Keslow is a longtime friend of mine. The first time I prepped out of Keslow camera, I prepped the camera in Robert's backyard because his rental house was in his garage of his house before he started and got the big facility he's at now. But Otto Nemens, Claremont, again, Panavision, Burns and Sawyer, so many in Hollywood and various other places. I've never had a bad experience with any of them. So.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I got one more, I think, as of now. I'm gonna scrub through one last time, but someone had asked, I want to find it so I can give them credit for having asked it. Oh, where is it? Oh, I'm past it. Okay, so it's down here. Someone had asked about David's, here it is. Sophia asked, quiet phone. Sophia asked, she wanted to know what David's favorite camera team was to be a part of and why. So what was your favorite crew experience and why was it your favorite experience?
Oh, that's a tough one because it's not really related to the team. It's related to the project we were working on. Because I loved working with so many people. There's a DP named Randy Sellers. He lives in Portland, Oregon now, who I did a lot of jobs with. And I loved working with Randy. But overall, I'm gonna say the best production, the most fun I had was on the Wonder Years. That was just the best show because of the cast and the crew and just everybody involved. So that's how I'm going to answer that question. It's not necessarily the best team, it's the best show. Because the best team I would have to pick and choose from different projects. This DP, that second, that first, that operator. There's a few, I won't mention names. There was an operator I worked with once who was continually telling me how to do my job as first AC. And finally, I just stopped one day and looked at him and said, how dare you tell me how to do a job that you've never done? So, that guy, I don't want to work with. I never did work with again. Yeah, there's so many great people I worked with that it's hard. It's hard to pick one crew. So.
Yeah, that's a great question and a great answer. I always think it's, or you were just talking about how you'll call up somebody who you were old friends with after not seeing them in person for 10 years. And it's as if no time has gone by after like such a bond on set. And I think that's so cool. Yeah. Matthew, do we have more questions or are we kind of winding down?
We're definitely in our wind down phase at this point. And so I have one. What we're going to do is I'm going to combine this question with a throwback to, so Milana had asked, are there any good habits that second ACs should follow, you know, and any tips for ACs in general? And so I'm going to tie it back to the improving organization question that we had earlier, and see if upon further thought you had, you know, just general tips for ACs who are starting out and how to be better organized and you know, get their career started.
Write things down. That's one way to get better organized. Always keep a little notebook in your pouch, in your vest, whatever device you have, in your back pocket of your pants, I don't care. And write things down, make notes, because you can't remember everything. Good tips for second AC. I always tell my seconds, eyes and ears open at all times. Get used to the voice of the people that you are reporting to. Get used to the voice of the first AC. Get used to the voice of the operator and the DP. So when they call your name, you're like, your head jerks to attention. You know, they're looking for you. And when someone says, "Hey, Dave," "Yeah, Dave here, what do you need?" Always respond, so they know that you heard them. But eyes and ears open. I use this example. I was doing a feature with Randy Sellers, who I just mentioned, up in Portland many years ago, and I was off to the side on set, but off to the side, talking to was fortunate enough to have 2 seconds, talking about, you know, and I always stayed on top of things. How's the camera truck? We have enough expendables. We have enough film. Do we have enough of this, etc.? Is everything organized? You know, where's the carts? And while I was talking to them, over here, I heard Randy talking to the director about the next shot, and all I heard was the words 50 millimeter. So I said to my seconds, I said, get the camera, put it over there where they were just talking, and put a 50 millimeter lens on it. About 10 minutes later, Randy comes over to me. He goes, "Dave, we're going to do the shot over there with the camera on the 50 millimeter. And he says, and it's already done, isn't it?" I said, "Yep." Because I was listening. I could talk to them and listen at the same time. And just, those are the kind of habits to get into. I had taken, long before I became a filmmaker, I took an acting class just for the fun of it. And one of the exercises we had to do is we had to sit in a chair with people on either side of us. And each person was telling a different story at the same time. And after, you know, a minute and a half or 2 minutes, they stop, and we had to basically repeat both stories. So we had to hear 2 different stories and keep them straight. And that was a great exercise to improve your concentration and your ability to remember things and so on. So that's why I say eyes and ears open, so you know what's going on around you. Get used to your name being called. Respond when your name is called. Back to the organizational and time management. Was it organization or time management, or both?
I think both.
Both.
Absolutely both.
Yeah.
Time management, it's still really hard to pinpoint. It's just something you've got to work at. You know, what is your weakest thing? You know, the weakest is getting up at 5:30 in the morning, and force yourself to get up at 5:30 every single morning, including the days you're not working. And you'll get, your body will adjust to it. if you just have to make a conscious effort instead of just throwing that stuff on the cart. Put it away when you're done using it. Put away the Allen keys that Caitlin leaves lying around where they're supposed to be. Just you have to make a conscious effort to do things a little different. Talk to people who you know are really good at time management and at organization, you know, and how do you do it? Like when I did a few television series and a couple of features where there were 2 camera shoots. So if I was on the B camera and I wasn't being used, because some directors don't like B camera, I'd find something to do. I'd bring the cases in from the camera truck that were not being used and clean them. And maybe if the labels are falling off, put new labels. Find something to do and not just sit around on your butt. But then you're right there on set or off set and handy and ready and available if they need you. So it's something you have to work at if you're not naturally good at the time management and the organization. There's a lot of great books about organizing, you know, go to your local bookstore, go online to Amazon and, you know, look some up. I wish I could be more specific. I feel really bad that I can't be more specific because it's just, you either have it or you don't. And if you don't have it, you've got to work really, really, really hard at it. So.
Yeah, I feel like that's a lot of great advice. And I think the overarching advice is also super helpful. Even, you know, sometimes, you know, specifics won't apply to everyone, but I think all of what you were saying really does. Just working at the areas, you know, you're not particularly strong in and like kind of relying on research and kind of always improving. And I want to plug, and you mentioned really good books. So I want to put in a shameless promotion for the Camera Assistance Manual. David did not ask me to do this, but I'm just doing this because I can't help it. Honestly, as an AC that started in Boston, which is a very small industry, this book is the only reason I was able to start working as a professional AC so quickly and just really rise in the ranks so easily, because this book just kind of answers a lot of the questions that a lot of us probably wouldn't have known to ask. So I put the link in the chat. Feel free to buy this. If you get an earlier edition, it may not have as much digital information, but it'll still have a ton of stuff on film. So if that's something you're interested in, that's also a really great resource to check out. Thank you again, David, so much.
Thank you.
So helpful. Yeah.
This was a lot of fun, really. I hope it was helpful.
Absolutely.
I try to be helpful when I can. I would love to do it again.
We should.
I really, I mean, this is the most fun I've had in years, really. I met some awesome people. Now I want to share with all of you, and you can put it in the chat, Caitlin, my email address. If you want to stay in touch or you have questions later on, it's real simple. It's david@davidelkins.com.
In the chat. Got it. So I know you.
Please stay in touch. I guess I'll be a little like Caitlin. Buy my book.
Is Amazon the best way to do that, or do you not see it?
Amazon, or the publisher's website, Focal Press, which actually is not Focal Press anymore. It is, I cannot remember the name of the Routledge, ROUTELEDGE, Routledge.
Gotcha.
Anyway,
I'll post that.
Or
link
Focal,
to the event
Focal Press will have it as well, but a lot of anybody that sells books online. And you know, if I lived closer to you guys, I would say we could meet up and do a book signing somewhere. But unfortunately, I'm in Connecticut, and most of you are probably in Los Angeles or some other faraway place, but if you want to spend a few bucks and send the book to me, I'd be happy to autograph it and send it back to you. But that takes time and money, which none of us have. So, but thank you so much for letting me be part of this. And Caitlin, thank you for organizing it and asking me to do it. Matthew, thank you for your help.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. We appreciate that.
Matt, I have a question for you. Since you're involved in the union, do you know Elena McManus?
Absolutely.
One of my former students from North Carolina.
She's fantastic.
Please.
Wonderful person.
She's amazing
Amazing
young woman. Please, if you see her, say hello for me.
I certainly will.
So.
All right, well, thanks. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. And this hopefully is going to be posted on a YouTube channel or a easily accessible link, which I'll post in the camera assistant groups, which most of you guys are all on. If you want to share that or, look up any of the resources we kind of threw around. So yeah, thank you again, everyone. Thank you, especially to David. And yeah, hopefully we'll do this again soon. This was great.
It really was a blast. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Happy shooting, everybody.